I just want to say just really how amazing this conference has been so far. And for any number of reasons, but in particular, let's say all of the speakers, one after another, home run, absolutely amazing, blockbusters. So, wow. It's just so impressive to see all the amazing things that are going on in the world of Buddhism and to meet all of you just really, really fantastic people who are devoting your lives to really worthy things. So my obeisance to everyone here. Today, this afternoon's topic has to do with, vaguely speaking, international Buddhism. And probably mostly in terms of like the two categories of Asian and Western Buddhism. And before I sort of talk about what the possible issues may or may not be, I just want to say that I myself am one person, and all of my students know that whenever I teach a class on Buddhism, I say that the first words that you're never allowed to use are East and West. And because, you know, the whole distinction between East and West is so quickly breaking down to the point that it's really, really hard to say who's Eastern and who's Western. And certainly Asian communities in the United States who have lived here for several generations, are they supposed to be Eastern or Western? Many of us who grew up in the US or European countries who went over and spent a lot of time, like myself, also in Asia, you know, I think of myself as a Western person, but I have certain imprints from long years studying with various Tibetan teachers that have changed me forever. And so, yeah, I'm Western, but there's a side of me, a certain kind of mannerisms and so on that you gain that you never give up. And so it's a complicated question. I'll just tell you one story, but it's a really important question too. One story is a couple of years ago, I was in Beijing at the University of National Minorities in Beijing, giving a lecture to a group of about 250 Tibetan students. They have a huge Tibetan program there. And I was talking about some of my work, which is in Tibetan studies, but I have somewhat of a critical feminist and also an interpretational kind of edge to the kind of work that I've been doing. And one of the students raised the question, and you get this a lot, saying, you know, you're not in the tradition, you're not Tibetan. How do you get to say anything critical about it? And so I kind of lightheartedly, but it sort of worked. I gave the example because the day before I had gone to the Great Wall with two of my Tibetan hosts. And then we found this wonderful tea spot afterwards, right on this, you know, misty day on the Great Wall. And the two of them both got cappuccinos at this tea spot. And I, of course, ordered Chinese tea, you know, green tea or something. So I said, who's Western and who's Eastern? Anyway, they all laughed. I mean, that doesn't really prove anything, but... but I think it's important. What I'm hoping our wonderful panelists today will address, you know, is there a difference in some ways between Asian Buddhism and Western Buddhism in the realm of ministry and especially ministry training? That very issue of wanting to make sure that we have this conversation and also to have a lot of people from communities in Asia that have been Buddhists for a very long time. Here at the Divinity Schools, part of why we got this Ho Foundation grant was to be able to bring scholars from Asia, and many of whom are here today, to have that conversation. But are there essential and important differences in the ways that Buddhists in Asia, in various Asian communities, are going about the project of ministry? Are there problems? And if we can talk about that as candidly as we might between what we might call Asian Buddhist communities or individuals or kind of reigning ideologies and those in the West. So on the one hand, are there problems? And on the other hand, opportunities. If we are in some vague way granting certain cultural differences, and of course, you know, at the minimum, it does have to do with generations of experience versus it being a new thing here in the West. What can each of us learn from each other? What can we contribute to each other? So those are the questions I hope that the panelists will answer, in addition to all the other things that they're planning to say. Let me just introduce all of them briefly. And in the spirit of waking everyone up, we're going to go in this order now instead of the other order. And so first we have David Matsumoto from the Institute of Buddhist Studies. David Matsumoto is a priest and a minister at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. He received his BA and JD degrees from the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, and MA from the Institute of Buddhist Studies, and MA and PhD from Ryokoku in Tokyo, Japan. He has translated from the Japanese Bearer of Light, the Light and Thought of Renyo, and by Jitsuen Kakehashi, a contemporary Shin scholar, and he currently lives in Northern California, where he teaches contemporary Shin Buddhist studies at the Institute for Buddhist Studies. Secondly, I'm very happy to introduce Bhikkhu Bodhi. He is an American Theravada Buddhist monk ordained in Sri Lanka and currently teaching in the New York and New Jersey area. He was appointed the second president of the Buddhist Publication Society and has edited and authored several publications grounded in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. He obtained a BA in philosophy from Brooklyn College in 1966. In 1972, he got a PhD in philosophy from Claremont Graduate University. And while he still was a graduate student, he was ordained as a Shramanera in the Vietnamese Mahayana order. And then after graduation, he traveled to Sri Lanka, where under Balangoda Ananda Maitreya Thero, he received Shramanera ordination in the Theravada school and received full ordination as a Theravada Bhikkhu monk. In 1984, he succeeded Nyanaponika Thera as the English language editor of the Buddhist Publication Society, and in 1988 became its president. He's the founder of also the organization Buddhist Global Relief, which certainly bears upon what we're thinking of as Buddhist Ministry, which fights hunger across the world. Thirdly, I'm very happy to introduce Ouyporn Khuankaew, who is from the International Women's Partnership for Peace and Justice in Thailand. She is a Buddhist feminist activist and has been a workshop facilitator in Asia since 1995. She facilitates workshops on feminist counseling, sexuality, and anti-oppression, peace-building, nonviolent direct action with Thai NGOs and government workers, and regional and international participants. She also guides meditation retreats for activists. She is the founder of the International Women's Partnership for Peace and Justice in Thailand. And she, prior to that, she ran the gender program of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. And finally, I'm honored to introduce Venerable Yifa, who is a Taiwanese Buddhist nun, scholar, and writer. She was ordained in Fo Quan Shan Buddhist Order in 1979. She holds a law degree from Taiwan National University, a master's in comparative philosophy from the University of Hawaii, a doctorate in religious studies from Yale University. She served as a department head and dean of University of the West during her tenure at the college. She has participated in many interfaith dialogues and has contributed to the UNICEF South Asia's Safe Motherhood Project. She is also the director of the Woodenfish program, which I think we'll hear about today, which is quickly growing inside China itself. She has been involved in translating sutras from Mandarin to English, and she has published with others translations of the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Kshitigarbha Sutra, Amitabha Sutra, and a whole bunch of other books. I'll just read a few of the titles: Authenticity, Clearing the Junk, A Buddhist Perspective, The Tender Heart, A Buddhist Response to Suffering, Discerning, Educating the Mind and Spirit, and so on. So please join me in welcoming these four really distinguished guests.
Thank you very much, Janet. First of all, let me say how very grateful and honored I am to be able to take part in this wonderful conference. I want to thank the Harvard Divinity School and all the organizers of today's conference, the whole family trust, and everyone who had anything to do with this wonderful and very, very evocative and insightful historic gathering today. I feel very honored to be here on the panel with the Venerable ones, and I'm very overjoyed that I'm able to share a few thoughts with you regarding my particular tradition, which is the Shin or Jodo Shinshu tradition. Some time ago, I think it was last fall, Charlie Hallisey happened to be in Berkeley and we were having a conversation. He said, "Oh, we're having a conference in the spring at Harvard Divinity School, why don't you come?" And of course I couldn't say no to him. I had no idea what to expect, and I didn't know I'd be representing the Japanese Jodo Shinshu tradition, but I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Today, we have a number of really wonderful questions that have been presented to us. I think I'll try to just address the first of the questions, which is, what can certain styles of Buddhist ministry in communities with long experience with Buddhist ways of life and thinking contribute to international programs with recent Buddhist provenance? I think it's a very a critical question, one that really will perhaps be a foundation point for all of the speakers on this panel today. As a result of the way the question is framed, I'll be sharing my thoughts with you today primarily as a minister, as a Jodo Shinshu minister, while I'm also on the faculty of the IBS. I enjoy both lives. Institute of Buddhist Studies is located in Berkeley, and the Berkeley Buddhist Temple is separated from the IBS by a wall. And there's a gate that opens between the wall, and so my life is spent going back and forth through the gate. And that's how I sort of describe my life. I go back and forth to either side of the gate. I'm often asked by people at IBS, or I'll often express the fact that I'm going to the other side of the wall. And people always ask me, well, which side of the wall do you prefer? Which is the most fulfilling to you? And I really have to say that I refuse to choose. I can't choose. Both my life as a minister and my life at the IBS are entirely fulfilling, meaningful, and they are, I think, essentially supportive of each other. But anyway, for the most part, I'll be just speaking to you as a minister, although I'll be going back and forth through the gate on occasion in today's talk. I'm here to talk about Jodo Shinshu, Shin Buddhism as we know it, which is, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is one of the largest schools of Buddhism in the world, if we use members or temples or priests. And it's one that, at least in the United States, is probably one of the longest standing forms of Buddhism. Jodo Shinshu, Shin Buddhism came to the U.S., to Hawaii back in the 1880s, and to the mainland U.S. in 1899. And it's been, after that, it's been really offering a very vibrant spiritual life for many, many, many people. What I'm going to describe to you today will be for those of you who were raised in church communities of various kinds, something maybe I would say frighteningly familiar. But for those of you who are not, those of you from monastic communities, especially those in Asia, in contemplative traditions, you'll hear something that's perhaps frighteningly unfamiliar. But that's sort of where Shin Buddhism stands in my view. It stands sort of at a junction between many of the spiritual traditions that we're familiar with today, and in particular in the West. I use that word. I shouldn't use that word. I'll use America. It just slipped out.
One bring down.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. C minus, I guess. Okay, all right. Well, there's a very long history, and let me just tell you a little bit about it. And I'd like to relate this history just in brief, even though some of you may be familiar with it, because I want to just present my views regarding both this Shin history as well as the styles of ministry and education in Shin Buddhism, both to introduce them to you, but also to suggest that what we find today in sort of the manner in which Shin Buddhism continues to operate in all three areas, perhaps a cautionary tale, a tale in which we would do well to be very, very careful about unassumingly, unconditionally reifying the Asian foundations of our Buddhist traditions. And I think we must be very careful about that, and I think this long history, this institution of Shin Buddhism as we know it today, serves very well in presenting to us a cautionary tale. Shin Buddhism said to have begun with a person by the name of Shinran, who lived in the Kamakura era in about the 13th and 14th centuries in Japan. He was a Tendai priest for some 20 years of his life until he decided to leave the mountain, leave Mount Hiei, with a sense of failure, having practiced and studied for 20 years and having been realized no progression on the Buddhist path, no accomplishment or attainment whatsoever. And so he left Mount Hiei in absolute despair. And after a certain period of time of deep self-reflection, he went to meet the person who was to be his true teacher, Honen. Honen, who many of you know, had also been a Tendai priest, but he also left the mountain and founded what we now know as the Pure Land movement. His teaching was that of the Nembutsu, saying Namo Amida Butsu, and saying that practice alone will bring about birth in the Pure Land. Shinran became a disciple of Honen. He received priestly names from Honen. But the Nembutsu movement, Honen and Shinran, suffered from suppression brought against them by the government and by the religious authorities of the time. The Pure Land movement was banned. Honen and Shinran and others were sent into exile, and some of the disciples were put to death. However, after being sent into exile into the northern frontiers of Japan, Shinran had been defrocked by the government. He had been given a lay name, but regardless, he took his own name. He took a name Shinran, which was not a priestly name. It was his own name that he selected for himself, and as well as another name, Gutoku, which literally means foolish, stubble-haired. And so he referred to himself as Shinran, foolish, stubble-haired Shinran, disciple of Shakyamuni for the rest of his life. So he clearly placed himself within the broad parameters of the Buddhist path. He was a disciple of Shakyamuni, but he continued to teach what he had learned from his master Honen for the remainder of his life. And luckily for us, he also spent the last 30 years of his life engaged in extensive writing. As you can imagine, the other things that happened during Shinran's life, which I forgot to mention, he married. After he was exiled, again, he was defrocked. His priestly status was removed. He took on his own names, and he married, which was probably not as unusual an event as we're led to believe today. I think things like that happen quite often, but he did so openly and publicly. And he also declared that he was, at that point, neither monk nor layperson. This idea of hiso, hizoku, neither monk nor layperson, became for him not only a social critique, but it was also an expression of his own religious understanding, his own insight into his true nature. After Shinran, that was some 800 years ago. And since that time, Shin Buddhism has grown in a variety of ways. There has now been a custom in Shin Buddhism that those we call priests, or soryo, or ministers in English, are ordained, but the ordination is very different from other Buddhist schools. There is the ordinants do not take the precepts, they do not undertake any vows. And in fact, they are, even though they receive priestly names, I should say we receive priestly names, for all intents and purposes, we live according to that sort of insight that Shinran used to declare himself. We're neither priest nor lay people. And so that's how the priesthood in Jodo Shinshu and Shin Buddhism is considered. The priesthood, as a result of that, there's also other changes that occurred. Temple ministry is not passed on from master to disciple. There's no specific dharmic lineage or transmission as in other schools, but rather the priesthood of a given temple is passed on from father to eldest son in this system of primogeniture, which has continued on to this day, not only with the abbot, the chief priest of the Honganji, but with all temple priests in Japan. The situation is quite different here in the United States. At the same time, with all of this going on, temple priests are not only allowed to marry, but we have the tradition of having families, of being very much involved in the local community. But at the same time, Shin Buddhist priests have been long considered to be teachers, Dharma teachers. And as a result, there's been a centuries-old system of education. In the beginning, the education of priests took place at temples, the Teragoya system. That later became, progressed into what the development of various academies that were present both in the capital of Kyoto and also in various regional centers where priests-to-be received education, and there was some further sectarian form of study of the doctrine. With the coming of the modern age, the academy system gave way to the university system. And in the Honganjis, the two Honganjis, Nishi and Higashi, which make up the two largest branches of Jodo Shinshu, there are more now, but there were originally two universities, Ryukoku University, which is affiliated with the Nishi Honganji, and Otan University, which is associated with the Higashi Honganji. And along with the universities, there's also an extensive seminary system, seminaries throughout Japan. Anyway, that's in broad terms the sort of the history of the priesthood and the educational system in Japan. And although one might look at this history and sort of reflect on it thinking, wow, that's really wonderful. You have this, the Nishi Honganji, Higashi Honganji have this extensive educational system, this extensive network of temples and priests. I think in large part, that administrative structure and the overall educational organization has led, in the opinion of many people, myself included, to a situation in which that form of study and education has become fairly regimented, and I would say relatively, well, I'll just say fossilized. The priesthood in Japan, as a result of many policies and events that took place in the prior to the modern era, the priesthood are essentially involved in rituals, and the rituals are, for the most part, the death rituals. They perform funerals and memorial services throughout the year. That's unfortunately the result of that is that the educational system has, to a large extent, been confined to the elite, the priestly elite, those who are so fortunate as to be able to study at the academies or the universities. There have been other events that have occurred in the history of Nishi Honganji that have led to a situation, as I mentioned before, where the teachings of Shinran and Shakyamuni have, to a large extent, become somewhat placed into a situation that make them, I would say, have very little to do with everyday spiritual life. There, for instance, among the fundamental aspects of Nishi Honganji orthodoxy is that we can do nothing whatsoever to affect our realization of enlightenment. That as ordinary, ignorant beings living in the last Dharma age, there's nothing whatsoever Any attempt for us to affect our own enlightenment is just evidence of self-power, and that's totally ineffective. And so all we can do is have faith in Amida Buddha to save us, to allow us to be born in the Pure Land and the life to come. That's how I'm very ashamed to say, that's how the teachings of Shinran and Shakyamuni have come to be rendered in Nishi Honganji orthodoxy. And there's also a development of what I would call sort of Nishi Honganji orthopraxy or non-orthopraxy, in which the generally held belief among many people is that we have no practice whatsoever. That even saying the Nembutsu is not a practice, and that all we can do is have faith in the Buddha to save us. That sort of thinking and that sort of both doctrine and practice, many people understand, and I agree, has nothing whatsoever to do with Shinran's thought or Shakyamuni Buddha's thought. It's the product of a long history of both religious and political agendas, and it seems to me that it's completely out of touch with our spiritual life. What does that say about the ministry, however, and what the ministry might be able to offer? I think even in spite of the Honganji, the role of the minister in Japan and in the U.S. is changing remarkably. I think even though perhaps the powers that be are unwilling to admit it, Japanese Shin Buddhists and American Shin Buddhists are grappling with the consequences of being battled within the waves of modernity. There's also a recognition that there's a recognition of the power and the significance of secularization and globalization. In the U.S., of course, there's a much different situation than we have in Japan. The U.S. Shin Buddhist ministers are more or less sort of like Protestant ministers. We have temples that are called Bukkyokai. I should also say that the Japanese word for overseas minister is kai-kyoshi. Those of you who know Japanese know kai-kyoshi literally is translated as messenger who reveals the teaching. And this is often conveniently translated as missionary. And so historically, the Jodo Shinshu ministers had been sent over to America as missionaries to convert the heathen, those who are unaware of the true nature of the Buddha's teaching. And unfortunately, that sort of approach or that sort of mindset was often found in early examples of Shin ministry in the U.S. This idea that, well, we just have to translate our doctrine into English, and everyone will then believe and have faith in Amida. Of course, in this age now, we understand that there are many other challenges facing Jodo Shinshu Buddhists in Japan and America. There's a recognition that, of course, we live in a religiously plural world. We live at a time, again, with the power of secularization is overcoming in many ways the religiosity of our own Buddhist traditions. In America, especially, there's of course an understanding of the importance of recognizing, accepting, and embracing our diversity of races, ethnicities, genders, ages, lifestyles, and religious histories. And of course, there's a recognition among our members, even in spite of the Honganji, of a sense of egalitarianism, of an ideal, a realization of the importance of equality of gender, racial, and other equality of all people. And so, and there's also, as with persons who are have come to Buddhism in the course of their own lifetime, there's a recognition that to be Buddhist in this world is also to be involved in this world, to be engaged in the problems and the efforts to alleviate suffering in the world. So all of this indicates, I think, that our Jodo Shinshu membership and priesthood are fully involved in the ongoing and the evolving spiritual life of our communities and our world, in spite of the Honganji. And I think that we have to, in many ways, understand that for Shin Buddhism, in Japan and in the US, this is also a critical moment. It's an historical moment in which I think it's important that we, in one way, find ourselves able to understand and to live the teachings of Shinran and Shakyamuni, but also I think to understand that there are not simply negative elements to our tradition, but also very positive ones. And I'd just like to share a couple of them with you if I could. I think there are certain ideals that are set out by Shinran that are quite important, not only for our religious lives, but our religious education. The first is, again, his statement that he's neither monk nor layperson. I think this statement was not simply, again, a critique of the society at the time, but it was is a matter of deep personal insight and deep personal understanding. At the same time, it was a critique, I think, and we have to realize that. It was his critique of the prevailing norms, of the assumptions of the hierarchy, the assumptions that underlay the hierarchies of religious institutions. And I think that his words also suggest to us today that both in our ministry and our education, that we also examine those assumptions that underlie our own lives, our own approach to religious hierarchy, to our consideration of just what is the meaning of priesthood and ministry versus laity. There's another really wonderful expression that he uses called ondo bo ondo gyo, which means we are all fellow followers and fellow practicers. The sense that there is no differentiation between people based on priesthood, based on race or ethnicity or gender, or sexuality or age. And then finally, I'd just like to share one last thought. It's an idea that he received from the Chinese Pure Land master Shan Dao, who pronounced that what is vital to our religious lives, he says, literally, is that we learn the great compassionate heart of the Buddha. I think perhaps another way to render this is that we learn of, from, and within the compassionate heart of the Buddha, of infinite light. I think what this indicates to us is that we thoroughly embrace the traditions that we've received, understanding the richness, the importance, the vitality of the religious lives that have kept it moving, kept it vital. But we also be willing to engage in a very serious and radical critique of that tradition, as well as our own institutions, as well as ourselves, at all times, in all situations. My teacher, Shigaraki Sensei, always used this expression when he talked about the path of Shinjin. He says it's a path of unrelenting self-scrutiny, that at all moments, at all steps, we engage in self-scrutiny, never letting ourselves off the hook, never allowing ourselves to think that we're waving these wonderful banners of equality when in fact our own lives are not directed whatsoever to the alleviation of suffering. And so those are just some thoughts I wanted to leave with you. Again, I'm very grateful to be able to sit here with all these Venerable Masters and to share some thoughts about Shin Buddhism. Thank you.
Okay, first I would like to confirm David's expression of gratitude to the Harvard Divinity School and the Ho Foundation for organizing this event. And I have to begin with a very candid disclosure. About 2 weeks ago, when I received the list of questions that was going to be posed for this panel from Janet Gyatso, I thought that I don't really belong on this panel because I was never trained as a minister. I don't train others as ministers, and I don't perform any ministerial functions. But she said to me that since I am sort of the founder of Buddhist Global Relief, that what I had to say about this organization would be relevant to the concept of Buddhist ministry. So I'll begin by speaking about the history and the mission of Buddhist Global Relief and our activities, and then I'll get myself in a little bit of trouble by speaking about some broader issues about the place of Buddhism in contemporary society. Okay. I think the distant, when the commentaries give the history about the Buddha's attainment of enlightenment, they give the long-term history going back to his original vow under Dipankara Buddha, the middle-term history going back to his birth in early life as Gautama, and then the near history, which is the events leading up to the Enlightenment. But I'll begin with the middle history of Buddhist Global Relief. And this goes back to the end of the year 2004. You see, I lived in Sri Lanka for almost 24 years. I came back to the United States in 2002, and I was living in a Chinese monastery in northwest New Jersey called, completely by coincidence, Bodhi Monastery. Now, in 2004, the day after Christmas, 2004, a tsunami struck South Asia, and one of the countries worst affected was Sri Lanka. And since I have a deep debt of gratitude to the people of Sri Lanka, I wanted to do something to help those who were affected by this calamity. And so I wrote a letter and I sent it to some of my friends and supporters connected with Bodhi Monastery. And I also sent it to my old friend, the Sri Lankan monk Bhante Gunaratana in West Virginia, who has a meditation center. He sent it to everybody on his mailing list. I also sent it to a woman who was on the board of the Insight Meditation Center in New York City. She sent it to everybody on their mailing list. And so within 2 weeks, we had collected $160,000. And everybody was looking to me to decide how to distribute the funds. And I decided that I wanted to send it, or at least give substantial portions, to Buddhist organizations that were doing relief work in Sri Lanka. And Google had put up a list of all of the organizations that were working to provide relief to communities affected by the tsunami. And I looked on the list, I saw many secular organizations like CARE, Direct Relief International, Oxfam, a large number of secular organizations, a fairly large number of Christian organizations, not all aiming to use this tragedy as an occasion for proselytization. Many are just founded purely on humanitarian principles. There were a number of Jewish organizations, Muslim organizations. I could find only 2 Buddhist organizations. One is the Tzuchi Foundation, which is actually based in Taiwan but has branches in the US. And the other is Sarvodaya, which it's based in Sri Lanka. It has a branch in the United States. And this was disturbing to me because we always promote Buddhism as the religion of loving kindness and compassion. But it struck me that when people are always talking about my practice, how is my practice going? And people are speaking about the practice of love, how they're developing loving kindness and compassion. But the question was really digging deep into my mind and nagging me. If we're promoting compassion so intensively, where are we when tragedy and calamity strike? And this was sort of simmering in the back of my mind. Then in the year, maybe it was 2007, Buddha Dharma magazine asked me to write one of their editorial essays. And so I wrote an essay, which I just called it commentary, but they gave the title to it, A Challenge to Buddhists. And what I pointed out in the essay is that if we're really going to adopt compassion as the base of our ethical commitments, it's not enough just to treat it as a purely inward state of mental exaltation, but it's necessary to take it as a kind of ethical challenge to put compassion into action through transformative activity that will examine and tackle the deepest roots of the concrete, real, afflictive suffering that people around the world are undergoing as on a daily basis. Okay, so I published. Oh, thank you. So I published that essay, and I didn't tell anybody about it. But some of my friends and students read the magazine and started to speak with me. They said that they really felt that this was a challenge and that we had to do something to take up the challenge of the essay, to put compassion into action. And so we started to have some initial discussions, and somehow the idea emerged to form a Buddhist relief organization. And within a short time, suddenly people were coming across my path that I never knew before. A woman came to see me who was the deputy director of care, and she told me that she wasn't a Buddhist, but we had some discussion, and she told me that she was going to be resigning from her position at care, and we were going to have our initial meeting for forming Buddhist Global Relief. So I said, why don't you come to our meeting? And she said, okay, I'll come. And she came along, and she was really excited by the discussions that were taking place. And she became the chair of our projects committee. Another woman came from Colorado to visit me at Zhuangyan Monastery, where I live. She eventually became our executive director. She had been a software engineer, but she said that she was retiring. So we suggested that she become our executive director. So in that way, we started to form a relief organization. Originally, we started with a very bold objective, a very bold sense of mission to address the problem of poverty, society, to help communities affected by poverty, communal neglect, and social oppression around the world. But it was just too grandiose, too ambitious. So within a short time, we found that we had to narrow down the focus of our mission. And so we decided to make the problem of global hunger or chronic hunger and malnutrition the specific focus. Because as I was reading on the internet, I learned that this is rather astounding that like 6 million people around the world die of hunger every year, and like more than half of them are children. Like 3 million children, 6 million people. Like that's a Holocaust taking place annually. And with just, if our governments were to put together money, it would just take $40 billion a year to eliminate global hunger. But nobody is putting up that kind of money because it all has to go into weapon systems and military hardware. Okay, so we decided to make global hunger, chronic hunger, and malnutrition the focus of Buddhist Global Relief. And we started with a few pilot projects and then sending out word. And then before long, we were getting increasing number of donations until we were able to expand the range of our projects. And the way we work, we just have like a small group of very dedicated people. So we're not able to send people to the different countries in which we establish our projects. But the way we work is to find organizations in these countries which have a similar mission. And then we form partnerships with them, whereby together we establish projects, and then we sponsor these projects, and they report back to us. And if the projects are successful, we continue to sponsor them over the next few years. And this way, we can develop long-term relationships. The way we refined our mission, and this took place over time, is initially when one thinks of combating chronic hunger and malnutrition, one thinks just of giving food aid. And so initially we thought that the way to do this is by helping communities get more food, just by working with organizations that are distributing food. But within a short time, as I was reading into the roots of the problem of chronic hunger, one of the things that struck me, that I was learning repeatedly, is that what sustains poverty and malnutrition around the world, one of the main contributing factors is the subordinate status of girls and women in traditional cultures. And so it was said that one of the most effective outlets from poverty and chronic malnutrition is to promote the education of girls. And we entered into a relationship like this. One of our partners works in Cambodia. The organization is actually based in the US. It's called Lotus Outreach, but their main country where they have their projects is Cambodia. And they have an ongoing program which is called GATE. The acronym is GATE, which stands for Girls Access to Education. And the way this project works, they provide quantities of rice to the families of the girls on the condition that the families permit the girls to remain in school. Because in the traditional cultures, when there are several children and the family is poor, when the girl reaches the age of 12, 13, they'll ask the girl to drop out of school and to start working. And in a country like Cambodia, at least half of those girls are going to wind up in brothels. So through this project, we provide rice to the families on condition that they keep the girls in school. And we started this project in 2009. And now, just the last couple of years, girls who have gone through the first stage of the project and they've graduated high school, now they are, many of them, I think 80 or 90 of them, are in college and university. Okay, so one is to promote the education of girls. Another method is to give women the opportunity to start right livelihood projects in order to earn more to support their families. And one of the projects that we have along this line is again, it's in Cambodia, with women who have been working in the sex trade. And so what we do with our partnership is to support these women to get education and vocational training so that they can leave the sex trade, go into some other occupation, and earn to support their families. And then closely connected with this aspect of our project is support for small-scale, ecologically sustainable agriculture. And this ties in with another major problem which is affecting the world, perhaps the umbrella problem which is now embracing everything, and that is the problem of global warming, climate change, ecological devastation. Because very few people realize that one of the main driving forces of climate change, sources of carbon emissions, is the industrial model of agriculture, which requires heavy machinery, clearing of forests, large-scale clearing of forests to create land for cultivation, which uses a lot of chemical inputs which devastate the soil. And so by supporting ecologically sustainable agriculture, organic agriculture, then on the one hand, it helps to reduce carbon emissions and even to return carbon back to the soil and back to the plants. And it also provides an outlet from poverty for many poor farmers who are usually, in many traditional countries, dispossessed of their land in order to clear the way for large industrial corporations to take over the land. Okay, and then, so we started with projects basically in Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, India, Sri Lanka. Within the next year, we had moved, starting projects in Africa, Kenya, Malawi, more recently Rwanda, Ethiopia. After the earthquake hit Haiti, we entered into a partnership with an organization working in Haiti called the Whither Foundation to provide meals to children who had lost either one parent or both parents. And now through that same partnership, we're supporting the education of these children who didn't have any opportunity to attend school previously. And now we also have projects in the United States where there's very widespread hunger and malnutrition, particularly in the inner cities. So what we're focusing on in these projects is supporting community gardens and community agriculture in vacant lots. So we have a project like this in New York City and the Bronx with an organization called the Urban Rebuilding Initiative. Another project, just a new one in Detroit. It's called Keep Growing Detroit, is our partner organization. And a similar project in Santa Clara County, California. This is in the South Bay of California. Okay, now one thing that strikes me as extremely important for Buddhists to be aware of in today's world, I would say that the work of Buddhist Global Relief is an exemplification and embodiment of compassion. But I see that there are two major ethical imperatives that we have to look to as guides to action. One is compassion and loving kindness, but the counterpart to that is justice. And I think that this raises an area where perhaps Buddhists in their thinking, their ethical thinking, have been deficient. And this is something which I think we have to learn from, particularly from the Christian Protestant churches, and perhaps particularly from the African American Protestant churches. I know just in the last few years I've been tremendously inspired by some of the African American preachers, of ministers working in New York City on increasing the wages of fast food workers and other workers who are working at minimum wages. And so I think it's important not only to emphasize compassion and loving kindness, but also to emphasize the need to establish justice. And justice is found, and we have to look into our Buddhist tradition to see what are the roots that we can draw upon. What are the kind of seed ideas that we could draw upon in order to develop an ethic of social justice? And perhaps we could see the foundation of this in resting on the principle that, I call this the recognition of subjectivity, which means the recognition that every human being is a center of subjective experience, that every human being, by the very essence of their being, is seeking to live, not to die, seeking to be happy, safe, and secure, and free from affliction and suffering. And when we start from that standpoint, then we could see that we have an ethical obligation, both individually and communally, to take actions that will eliminate the deep underlying causes of social and economic and political injustice. And that should spur us. It seems that as we've been discussing Buddhist ministry today, we've been focusing upon specific areas: care for the sick, providing guidance for prisoners, psychological counseling for people afflicted with psychological distress, care for those who are dying. But we also have to look more broadly to see what are the all-encompassing social structures that engender, sustain, and enforce social, economic, and political injustice. And so maybe with this I will conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Venerable. I felt the same thing. So the word ministry and institution doesn't work for me because I'm in the part of my work in Thailand and around the country with the activists is we name the institutions and ministry, like Ministry of Health, Ministry of, education, are the root cause of suffering. So this is why I'm going away from that. So be aware when you use the word institution. Because institution for me, in Thailand, even some of my activists turn their organization into institutions. I mean, one, you become rigid and controlling, and you started hierarchy. And also you draw more resource than other group, on the grassroots group. So just keep self-examine yourself as an institution. I looked through the question, and I think I've been teaching engaged Buddhism since '95. I think starting from involved in the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, which is the only one, the global network that deal with injustice. But then I've also found that at that time there's no gender. So, so again, I think we left, the thing for me is the work that I've been doing on my clique is actually reforming this Sangha. Because in a country like Sri Lanka, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand, the only person that can gain enlightenment is a straight male. So the less, so I just want to remind you, when you said we're gonna hold and carry on this tradition, you make sure you don't carry on the patriarchy. You that you spread that seed of, I think the Buddha is, we often say he's the first feminist, right? Because he ordained women. And he ordained the untouchable. So that even the Brahmin who ordained before him has to bow to the untouchable. You see that this is all about how he, so to me it's again, don't romanticize this Asian Buddhist lineage. Because I have a whole life working through that. So it's true, So I will start with the question to share. How do I work trying to build the Sangha is who and to whom. The Sangha has to be diverse from the beginning. The Buddha has really laid out, right? Male, female, ordained people, So if you can have that as diverse as you can, and which I have seen already here, and this is hopeful for me, and it's worth my time coming here. Now, I'm very grateful that you invite me, but I feel very hopeful to see if you have mixed gender, lay people, ordained people, if you can have a mixed people of different class, ethnicity. I would love to see more African American teaching coming up here. I want to see disabled people, people marginalized. And the reason I said that is that in my work with different groups, different activists, the best Buddhist teacher I have found are transgender person, because they have no place in the Sangha, no place in the family, no place in our society. The people living with HIV and the disabled. And they never meditate, they said. They never read any sutra, but they are so enlightened. So again, when we talk about how many sutra you have to recite, how many. So that's the who and the whom. Make it as diverse as you can. Make it collective, make diverse. The content, I have found, the reason I've said that I have found is the content of the Buddhist teaching that I use is mainly I use the Four Noble Truths to look at any form of suffering, racism, gender oppression, violence, poverty, whatever. This is because in our traditional Buddhist monastery, still in Tibet, I'm still going to work with the nuns in Dharamsala in Ladakh, and used to work a lot with the nuns and monks in Thailand and also Sri Lanka, Cambodia. They don't know the Four Noble Truths. They don't use the Four Noble Truths. This is the only thing that Buddha had been teaching the rest of his life after he discovered that enlightenment. So it's a lot of missing, in this traditional Buddhism. So spending years and years reciting, reading the sutra, there's no awakening. Because I found the Four Noble Truths is the most critical analysis and so simple. Of course, the NGO do not want to hear anything with Dhamma words, so I cannot say that. So, but I use the Four Noble Truths. I don't say that word. You know, it's just, what is suffering? What, can you explain to me what are the form of gender oppression? What are the root cause? Can you imagine our society without gender oppression? And then how we go, it's a Four Noble, it's the Eighth Noble Path. But you don't say that to activists because they don't want to hear anything to Dhamma. So it works everywhere. The second one that I use a lot because I work with domestic violence is I use the Four Abiding Abode. And is even adopted by the Christian women leader in the refugee camp. Because, you know, when you work with the Buddhist women, they said, this is my karma, my previous life, you know. The previous life, I probably beat up my husband. So this, the monk told her, so this life you endure compassion. You know. So the Christian would say, this is my fate, right? This is God-given. So you can divorce or whatever. So I just thinking so much after I went to retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh. He was presenting this Four Abiding Abode, and he said, these Four Abiding Abodes also a path to enlightenment. I said, how? But he didn't specifically say how. So I went back home. I said, oh, why don't I apply this into relationship? You know, hetero, gay people, whatever it is. Loving kindness, compassion, particularly for women, compassion to self. If you don't know how to be compassionate, you don't know what compassion is. If you don't know how to love yourself, you cannot really. So again, the third one is joy, and the fourth one is equanimity, which we translate as no possession, no controlling, not dominating your partner. You know? So again, and the gay people love this one. You know, the reason why the non-Buddhists like this one, because I told them story that Buddha used this when the Brahmin came and said, "Oh, I lost all my children." You know. They turn into your disciple. So give me a teaching that, you know, that is can work for me, but I'm not converted. So the Four Abiding Abode is for the non-converter. That's why the Christian and other faith like to hear and listen, because I also do interfaith work. So again, I'm really happy that you're talking about how to use the Four Noble Truths to understand the root, the structure greed, the structure anger, the structure delusion, patriarchy, you know, everything. Is that it's nice to hear we are talking about social service work. So what happened in Thailand and the movement that I've been working is that because the NGO go first to deal with social service, to the point they forgot what are the root cause of those suffering that they are providing social service. So I give you an example. I work this transgender group, and the government keep giving them money to work, feeding them money and things. But it's so deeply homophobia and transphobia in the government with working HIV. But here we give you the money, you do with your own group. So you see what I mean? That you are. I think it's good to do social service, but we have to say that I don't know how many one-stop crisis center in Thailand we're gonna have. If we don't promote women ordination in Thailand, in Burma, in Cambodia, you will not train enough people to deal with domestic violence, right? So again, the root cause. Okay, the next one, I'm sorry, I'm taking your time. The methodology, which is very amazing for me, because I find this, again, when we talk about patriarchy, it's not just the physical thing you see, the male dominant. I think the practice, the view, can be, it's also patriarchal, and it can be very deep-rooted, and we don't see it. So I often say, in the meditation or teaching Buddhism, stop preaching, if you can. Because if preaching work, most of the Thai population will be enlightened by now. You know, we have 67 million people. so I will be enlightened by now, right? I'm 52, so heaven. I think dominant culture, what it has is not just the able-bodied hetero-male dominate, the institution, all institution. It's also how we relate, how do we educate. So I would invite you to change from teaching to facilitating. Especially we know that everyone had a Buddha nature. So facilitate until the Buddha nature, they pop up like popcorn. And I have seen that. I have seen that working with people. You just have to have that faith that people have wisdom, and of course they have ignorance too. But it's just like I just amazed how you move from teaching, preaching to facilitating people to wake up, and then it reminds me, I'm not a teacher, I'm a beginner. I learn every time, talking less, listen more. Never think you know the answer. And move it to investigating and exploring, especially in the collective wisdom. It's always come up. And again, fixing and controlling to being a witness. I remember 2 years ago, co-panel with Bernie Grassman, and he said it took him 3 years with just being present with the poor homeless people in New York. It took him 3 years to get a friendship, to be friend, to get trust. And that 3 years, mainly, he just be with them, Experiential ways, I found, again, keep reading the story how the Buddha teach. I always remember the story of Kisakotami who lost a child. And the Buddha said, and bring the dead body to the Buddha, saying, someone told me you can bring back the life of my child. He said, yeah, how about you put that child down and then go back, and go to each house. If you find any house that never lost anyone they love, something like that. So it's very experiential. So involve your heart, involve the work through the body. I work a lot with trauma survivor, and similar like many of you, the breath and the body. The breath and the body coming back. And 2004, we were very daring. We housed the women of Burma from different ethnic groups for 3 months on Buddhist and peace building. And the second week, they're about to kill each other. So also, second week, they really jump with a knife, gonna kill the other, I think. So we gone through a lot, and I found that sitting eye closed doesn't work. And it doesn't work for many people. And I often say, and I keep saying, in Thailand, a sitting eye closed often fit with privileged male people who doesn't have credit card, that has a wife and kids to attend, doesn't have anything. Everyone providing you food, shelter, money, and everything. So you can sit eye closed on your cushion. So again, about privilege. So I find it, you work with the disabled, right? They don't even feel their body up to here. So again, but how do they survive and become so bodhisattva? So you ask them, what is your practice? So you add on to it. I don't know, I think a few things I already said. The last one, maybe I not answer your question at all, is how do we connect with other group around your country and around the world? I think Buddhist Peace Fellowship, it's amazing. They deal a lot with the root cause of suffering. Quaker are my teacher. Quaker are amazing. Quaker make sure in their Sangha, they make sure that gender, they make sure that young people involved in the leadership, they make sure they are, gay people, different group. Quaker is amazing. And I learned a lot from them. And there's a few group that I would invite you. The Dalit community in India is emerging. They've been there, 30 million of them. very isolated. Very isolated, working with the very, oh my God, so many levels of oppression, being the Dalit in India, but overshadowed by Tibet, because Dalai Lama and everything. But it's a group that we learn a lot and share a lot and connect. I think if you would go to India and connect. Of course, Cambodian, the Mahagosananda, his work still continue. And in Thailand and some group in Burma. So if we can connect and learn from each other, exposed to the suffering, but expose ourselves to enlightenment, there's a lot of thing going on there. And if it's anything that I think because a lot of Buddhist book in Thailand are translated from a Western teacher from America particularly. So if ever you are invited to teach, I would ask or encourage you to talk about in your teaching or in your living here, how are you dealing with the issue of racism, gender oppression, and economic injustice here? And that the type will wake them up, That's all my sharing. Thank you.
Okay. I have PowerPoint. I think this is the best way to keep everyone awake, since I'm the last one. Before I talk about Woodenfish in China, I like to say a few words about my experience with the University of the West, since I'm the one, to set up the chaplaincy for the University of the West. In 1996, after I finished my PhD degree, I was assigned by the temple to University of the West. At that time, we just purchased a new campus, and there was nobody in the campus. I was the first one moving in there and guarded the campus. So I was afraid like someone would come to damage the campus, the building. And so one of my devotees asked me, say, then you are not worried about someone come to damage you? I said, it was not in my mind. At that time, we only have a religious study department, only one department. And I was thinking about to have a university, you need to consider financial sustainability. So then to set up an MBA came to my mind. And I helped the temple to set up an MBA. And there was two focus. One is doing business in China. That was in 1996. The second one will be nonprofit organization management, because I think the temple church need to have the way to manage. For example, nonprofit organization also have a museum, foundation. And I think that money is not evil at all. Money is just a mean. And if you use the money in the right way, it can be a good tool. And I also have learned that money for a nonprofit organization, it didn't mean you cannot make money, but you have to, the money you made have to serve your mission. That's what I learned from the nonprofit organization management. And, and then also 2005, my second time go back to University of the West, and I started to this chaplaincy, because at that time I think it's only Naropa have the Buddhist chaplaincy, the first one, our pioneer. And then I know that also, the GTU also, started. The reason to set up a chaplaincy at the University of the West is because it was founded by Fo Guangshan, and then about 15 minutes drive from the University of the West, there's a Xilai Temple. And this is based on the Chinese Buddhist, so-called Han tradition Buddhism. And it's full of very rich resources. When we talk about what does it mean about ordination for the chaplaincy? And it's already existing in our tradition. For example, for lay people, if we means the ordination means you will receive the precept and you make a vow, then that for the lay people, in Chinese tradition, you take 3 refuge first, and then 5 precept, and then you move to Bodhisattva precept. And that's based on the Brahmanat Sutra. And also, you also have a need to have I know that you need to have practicum, the credit, and the temple will be the right place to be. So that's I hope that the chaplaincy program at the University of the West can kind of follow that kind of at the original what we think. I was very happy. I was under the guidance of then the president Lou Lancaster, and also I also very respect our he already passed away. What's it? Ananda Guruge. Yeah, he was the dean of academics team. So we working together and to put this program. Okay, so now the very interesting my experience with my organization. Every time in United States we also talk about institution church or institution temple. My experience with the University of the West is every time I was assigned to the temple and I helped to set up a new program, and I will receive an award the first time from Taiwan, and then I got fired by the temple. And then second time I went there, also I set up this new chaplaincy, and then I also received an award, and then I got fired again. Okay, and I think that you know what? Don't use a common logic to judge the temple. This is very Zen. Okay, you know how the Zen is training, isn't it? And indeed, I think that we always say one door closed, the other door open. So we have to think about is Bodhisattva in disguise. Okay, so then after, well, it's kind of a little bit before I left the University of West, I started so-called the Woodenfish. Okay, here, the first one, let me tell you, what does it mean about Woodenfish means? This is not based in Indian Buddhism, but it's very Chinese. And there was a metaphor about that the fish never close their eyes day and night. So that means always keep awake and vigor. When I explained this meaning to our student from the West, so the Western student, and they will argue with me, say, Yifa, the fish, they do not have an eyelid. That's why they don't close eyes. I said, that's not the point. Okay, my point is I want to tell you this is the meaning of awakening. Okay, so, and let me tell you why my program called Woodenfish. It's because after the first year, it's 7 days intensive meditation, and my student came out from this Western student. Okay, came out from this retreat. Do you know what they came out with it? They came out with a rap song called Woodenfish. And that is why our program called Woodenfish. Yeah, it's cute. Okay, so the Woodenfish focus on cultural exchange. And so at the beginning, we bring the Western student to Taiwan, and now in mainland China, we bring scholar and college student and American-born Chinese teenager, because the whole program are all in English. And now I bring the Chinese people to United States, and then in the future to the Europe. For example, this time I really appreciate this Harvard Divinity School, this ministry initiative. Original, you invited me, and then it came to came to my mind. I think that this is the best opportunity to bring our, the monks from China and also our Buddhist lay people, from China. So indeed, this is our first time to try to bring them here. And later I will introduce, all of them. Okay. And so originally of the Woodenfish, we call Humanistic Buddhist Monastic Life Program. And it was started at 2002 when I was a visiting scholar at Harvard that summer. And I also was the abbess of the Foguangshan's temple in Cambridge here, in Boston. So I was thinking, because I myself, I went to, I was in law school, and I meant to become a lawyer, and then finally to become a politician. Because in my mind, I was thinking about if you are looking for the justice, you need to change the social infrastructure. And the way to do it is to become a politician. That was in my mind when I was young. But very interesting, when I was in college, the first year, get to the second year, and I went to Foguangshan, the temple, I was not a Buddhist at all. I never bowed to the Buddha, but after 2 weeks, then I shaved my head and I become a nun. Since then, it has been 36 years. And never change a thought, okay? Never regret. Okay? And being a nun is wonderful. It's a wonderful life. Okay? So because that experience, and also I know that many of the Buddhist scholars, they always have an experience when they were young. They will visit at the temple, or even sitting at the temple, or even become a monastic at the temple, like we all know Robert Boswell and maybe John McGray, these old scholars, they all have that experience. But it's very hard for women. So that's why when I started this program, I think about it, I can create a program easier for women to join. So in our program, we always say half a half, make sure half men and half women. So this is the first year in Taiwan doing meditation. And this program is for 1 month, every summer, every year's July, the month of July. Okay. So this is the year we moved to China 2 years ago. Okay, taking the book, Guotang, this is a rituals for taking meal. And they're learning Tai Chi, and they're learning Kung Fu, Shaolin Kung Fu. Okay, and then they attend some ceremony. Okay, here. And they take this was the last year, they took five priests and then 3 refuge at the mountain Wutai. And see who is here? It's let me see here. Okay. Gutong? Yeah. Stand up. Gutong, I want to introduce him because he always called himself the second generation Buddhist because his father is the founding president of a Buddhist association in Norway. Yeah. So he was raised as a Buddhist family. Thank you. And he helped me a lot. From last year and this year, he's doing all the recruitment, and I don't have to worry. Okay. So this was the last year when we were at the Baoding Temple. Okay, for the scholar, it started, we call Buddhism in China and connecting with the source. I started at 2009, and I took a group of scholars. The first year we went to Xi'an. You know Xi'an is where Chang'an, or formerly called Chang'an, and where it was the introduction of Buddhism into China, at that city, and do a lot of sutra translation. Okay. And so we went to Mountain Wutai and Erme, Putuo. Those are the 3 of the 4 great bodhisattvas, mountain, sacred mountain. Yeah. And then also we have a platform sutra here. It's the Peter Gregory from Smith College. So all the program is conducted in English. So we started Platform Sutra back to the Huineng's temple, Nanhua Temple in Guangzhou. And then also have a Guanyin study in Mountain Putai And then Vinaya, Bhikkhuni Vinaya study at the Chengdu Bhikkhuni's Buddhist College. And I have Anne Helman from Belgium, Ghent University. And then last year, we have the Tiantai study. And this year, we're going to have a Nirvana Sutra. I invite Mark Blum from UC Berkeley. And then we will go to Wu, because where Wu was used to be the Liangzhou, where the Nirvana Sutra was translated. So China has a 2,000 years of history for Buddhism. And also, if we talk about canons collection, the Chinese Buddhism has a vast, precious, the collection of the canon. For example, I myself, my dissertation is on the precept, and the 5 of sectarian, the Vinaya collection, it's all in Chinese language, okay? And so I think, and with the economic power in China as well. So, Woodenfish in China, I started called Woodenfish International, so that means the cultural exchange. And I also have we call train academics, basically 书院, also means the training center. And I would like to introduce one because this is exactly what I'm doing, the lay Dharma teacher in China, okay, and consultant, the wedding, hospice, retirement, okay. So in order to kind of have some activity in China, I started called Sramanan, lay women salon, and then Vimalakirti salon for the laymen, and then Sudana, the young man, and also Shanhui, and parents and kids salon. It's very interesting because the education, it's very important for the Chinese parents. And lots of them are indeed at the Buddhist, okay? And in this salon, the kids are, they can recite, the 5 years old, they can recite Heart Sutra, like 206 words, Chinese words, Heart Sutra. And they also have elementary school. This founder required the student to recite, to memorize, like over 5,000 words of a Diamond Sutra for the kids. Yeah, is that amazing? Okay, so I started this called Lay Dharma Teachers Program. And in Chinese, we call Tan Jiao Shi. The word of Tan came from Dana. Everyone knows Dana. It's a kind of a giving. And in China, this word called Tan is become referred to the Buddhist laity. And so Tan Jiao Shi basically means immediate you use a Tan, it's a lay teacher, lay Dharma teacher. And what I started is, we need to keep the balance about theory and practice. So we have theoretical training and also practical training, okay? So this in order to get a lay Dharma teacher, I kind of established, the 12 rank for people. So that means it will take about 4 years. Each year, you can get up there for 3 rank. And then each rank take for 1 month. Okay, here. 1 to 9 is called candidate, the Tan Jiao Shi. And then when you up to the 10, you call assistant, and then associate and 4. I'm working at the university. I know how to apply the name. Okay, so the 4 years, it would take about 4 years. And each year they were, the people, they will study Buddhism and then to go, and 3 months for a rank. And then each month they have to study for 3 times, 3 weeks, the teaching. And I will tell you the curriculum, okay? So the examination have a writing and oral examination. So the curriculum, okay. I understand, but we started late. Okay, I understand. I make it quick. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so the curriculum was, I tried to start from the concept of a triple gem, and then also fundamental teaching and Madhyamika teaching and Yogarachala teaching and Tathagata teaching. Because this whole system is a kind of, in Chinese Buddhism, we think this should be the order for you learn about the Buddhist theory or the Buddhist teaching. And then I also put some history and then also focus on biography of, Okay, so the textbook, we have the textbook, and in Chinese tradition, in our custom, we have 13 sutras. I'm not going to through it. So this is a selected sutra. So this is also included in the curriculum. Okay, and then supplementary, it's not only sutra, you also pick up some of the commentary or treatise. Okay, the practice, they have to take a refuge, they have to take a 5 precept, and we also have a weekend retreat and practical record, keep the record how many times they do meditation, or they're doing bowing, or the Kopi Sutra. Okay, so this is a training. Okay, so every time we have the study class, then we have we started so-called the dhyana, prajna, and sila. That's what those 3 learning. So we have meditation for an hour in the class and remind them about the 8 kinds of mindfulness. And basically that's developed from the 3 refuge and 5 precept, the concept. Okay, and so the future, we're going to set up a Buddhist Research Translation Center, a CM, a Dharma Teacher Translation in Beijing, and the next year we're going to have Woodenfish Forum. And the reason I come up with this idea is because here we have the chairman of our Woodenfish, the board of member, lots of them, and Mr. Zheng, you can stand up, he's an investor. And I never asked him a penny. We never talk about money. But he told me, last month he told me, he said, Fashi, I have made 0.6 billion, just this 4 months, RMB. So it's about like 0.1 billion, US dollar. And immediately when I hear this one, I told Mr. Deng, say, I'm going to do all this. And you have to help me. Yeah. So next year we invite everybody to come to Beijing for the Woodenfish Forum. And so, and we also have some people from CCTV director, and the monks. Monks also graduate from college. He's the abbot of a temple, and Meredy working. Their company is doing like a water dance at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. Okay. Okay, and so I'm not going to through, but tomorrow, if I may, we have Mr. Wang. He's an artist. He bring a guqin, a musical instrument. The wood is the age is 2,000, and the culture of guqin, the string music instrument, is 4,000 years. So if we may, tomorrow maybe we can ask him to play a little bit and we can do in a meditation. Okay, that's finish my presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you.